Hello, and welcome to Catholicism in the Car. My name is Parker Zerbal. Today I want to continue talking about the argument from realism. This argument goes like this. If you take the premise that realism is true, I propose that you can get to something that looks very much like, if not exactly like, the Catholic Church. Part of a realist thesis is that reality on Earth have natures. I guess you could say realities everywhere have. They have general concepts that connect them together. There is such a thing as treeness, or dogness, catness, humanness, or a better term would be humankind. Within a realistic paradigm, especially that put forth by Blessed John Duns Scotus, in which the beings of both God and man are the same by definition, but differentiate in reality. For of course, one is infinite and one is finite, amongst other differences. If one were to take a nominalistic point of view, nominalists would say there is no general natures amongst things, so there is no such thing as human nature or cat nature. These are just constructs of the human mind. Now, it seems to me that a conclusion of nominalism would be that God and man are actually very similar in their being. That they are truly univocal. Not in the sense of Blessed John Duns Scotus, where they're only univocal by definition, but not in reality. No, in the nominalistic sense, the ontologies of both God and man are truly univocal, which makes it so that God's being is purely spiritual by his nature, and thus, because of the univocity, man's nature must be spiritual. Now, this idea creates all of the subsequent problems, I would say, within modern thought. Once you think that man's nature is purely spiritual, it is very easy, once one no longer believes in the spiritual, to say, well, man's nature is purely natural. When there is no longer a composite view of man, but instead there is an individualistic view of man, I would propose that you get major problems. Now, from a realist perspective, man is a body and soul composite. And this is not in the dualist sense, because in the dualist sense, man's soul is his primary characteristic, and the soul is just being encased by the body. No, in a realist sense, man is an enfleshed soul. Or you could also say, ensouled flesh. Now, why is this so important? Because when you have man being an enfleshed soul, and you have man, by his definition, imaging God in his very being, it must be, therefore, that everything man does must be a reflection upon his nature. Everything, it's like a puzzle piece. Everything man does must fit into his nature. Everything man does must be a material and spiritual composite in order to be truly a good act, in order to truly fulfill his being and his existence. Therefore, if God exists, and if God were to communicate to man, the best way to God to communicate to man according to his nature would be through a composite means, through a means where physical and spiritual are united in one flesh and come to man. This is a great argument for why God had to become man. It wasn't because of necessity, but it was because of fittingness, and that it was the best way for God to redeem humankind. Now, not only does this apply to redemption, but it also applies to the church as she is known today. If God were to allow for the church to continue after the death and resurrection of his only begotten Son, this church would follow the incarnational model. Why? Because, as I've stated before, the incarnational model is best for man, like a puzzle piece. So, in an incarnational model of the church, not a spiritual model, you get sacraments, where God works through physical means to achieve spiritual ends, and you get miracles, in which God works through spiritual ends to achieve material means.